Hello, everyone. Clean my thing there. Welcome. I'm so excited to be meeting with all of you. I feel like I have so many questions for you to learn a little bit about who I'm talking with and who I'm talking to. I'm just going to pull up the participants here. Alex, you're here, right? Yes. Okay, cool. Alex, I just sent you a request to talk if you're okay with it, just because I have some questions I'd love to ask so that I can have a better idea of kind of where everyone's at. And then it allows me to hopefully better answer your questions. If Alex, you don't want to, maybe nominate, tell, what's it, what do you call it? Like, just, yeah, say someone, please go on.
Hello, no worries.
Okay, cool.
Answer.
How's it going, Alex?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. So it's 1:00 there, right?
It is.
Nice. It is 8 p.m. Nice and dark outside here. Okay, so I've got a few questions. We'll get through these really fast, but it's just so I can have a better understanding of how to make sure I'm guiding you with all the right information. So when do all of you finally graduate?
First week of December, we will be done.
Okay. And then do you know when you actually get your graduation certificate? Around then?
That is a great question.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. When is your ceremony grad? Do you know?
It's going to be in May, usually the first week of May.
Okay, perfect. And then do you know how many placement hours in total you will all have had by the end of your program?
So we are short at USID, so all of us will be working directly after to accumulate those hours.
Okay. And do you get paid for those hours or you're not paid for those hours? How does that work?
Yeah, so the uni gives us an option of taking another placement and essentially paying $7,000 and not getting paid for our work, or we can go out and find a job ourselves, and then therefore get paid for those hours.
And do you know if that is approved by the CAPR, those hours?
I would assume they are because that's what we were told going into the program.
Okay, we'll talk about that a little bit. Just gonna make a note to myself. And are there first and second years here, or is it just the second years?
I'm not too sure. I extended the invite to the first years as well. So I'm not sure if any of them popped in.
Okay. Fun fact, Ivana just won our contest today.
I know, I saw that.
How cool.
So cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. Okay, great. And then do you have to have a certain amount of placements in like MSK, cardio? I'm assuming yes.
Yes and no. They've been pretty good at I think for the Australians it doesn't really matter, but they've been purposeful with placing us Canadians and ensuring we have like the 3 core areas, so neuro, musc, and CP.
Yeah. Okay, perfect.
But in Australia, they don't specifically count their hours, but I believe us Canadians have been ourselves.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much, Alex. That answer gives me a lot of good information so I can better guide everyone. So thank you.
No worries. And UT added something in the chat as well about our hours.
Oh, okay. UT, I can clarify that we'll graduate with 840 hours, 800 from placements and 40 from Sin Week. Okay, cool. I totally just realized that I didn't even introduce myself. I'm just the random kind of here to talk to you. No, my name is Caitlin. I have a really geeky slide that shows you my face. Hold on, maybe in like a real cool physio pose. So hello, my name is Caitlin. I'm a Canadian trained physio. I went to UBC. I graduated in 2013. And since then, I actually started PT exam prep while I was in physio school, crazy enough. I kind of had this reputation in school of just quizzing people and teaching people. And I would have these kind of game nights where people could learn different topics. And selfishly, it really just helped me study. But I learned really early on that I love that. And so I had a lot of profs who were research profs for people who were getting their PhDs and they were working towards becoming a physio in Canada, ask if I would mentor their physios. And long story short, it kind of just ended up being something that I've just always been really, really passionate about. And now, yeah, we have 27 teachers. We have locations across Canada and it's pretty cool. It's an amazing, fulfilling area of practice to go into for sure. Area of practice, you can call it that. And then my other hat that I wear is I am a clinician. I do work in MSK private practice. Is anyone here going to be going back to BC by chance? The best province?
Yes, I think there's quite a few of us from BC.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. Okay. So, yeah, I live right by the border in, I grew up in Surrey, like the hood Surrey. I went to a school called Timanawis. And if anyone knows Timanawis, then you know I'm part like gangster. But I live in South Surrey and I work at a private practice clinic there, and it's wonderful. So that's me. Hello, hello. I wish I could get to know all of you. I actually like today, after I saw that Ivana won, I was trying to add some of you on Instagram and creep you. So I'm like, okay, let's get a face to some of these names. So Alex, that was the first time I like really, creeped your profile today. So okay, I've got so much to go over, but I do want to just kind of throw out to you just what questions do you have? Just is there any like burning questions that you're like, I really hope she answers today? Because I will spend a little bit more time if I see kind of themes to your questions. But pop it in the chat box. I do like people to use the chat box, not the question box. Then it's just one place that I'm checking, if that's okay. But I will kind of monitor that. So if you do think of any questions, please let me know. Okay, so let's dive in. I have so much to go through. So first of all, let's give you a quick little overview. So as you're prepping for this exam, you are kind of in that middle section, the PCE, but there's a few other things you need to do before that. So you obviously have to apply for your credentialing. And so that's kind of first. Then what you're going to do is you're going to prep for your exam, and then you're going to apply for your physio license. So the big thing is we come in at this spot. We come in at that PCE stage, and PCE stands for Physiotherapy Competency Exam. Just in case I use abbreviations you don't know, just let me know. But I'm not a specialist at the credentialing, and I'm not a specialist at the licensing. So I will do my very best to answer any questions that you have. And if I can't find the answer, then we'll find someone who knows. Okay. Alrighty. So the credentialing aspect is done by the CAPR. So the CAPR is pretty much, they're called the Canadian Alliance of Physiotherapy Regulators. You may hear people call them CAPR. I feel like I still call them CAPR. But they're pretty much who does the credentialing assessment on behalf of the provinces and territories, and they'll review your education to see if it meets the standard of practice kind of within Canada. So at USAID, you guys are completely fine. It's a well-established program. You have something that's actually called precedent. So what precedent is it means that CAPR has already done an assessment of an applicant with a similar education to you, and same as kind of everything on that list. And they've pretty much determined that, like, yep, you're good to go. Now, COVID caused a huge, just a bunch of craziness for this credentialing process. So the hours, I do want to kind of talk to you a little bit about that. But ultimately, if there is a precedent case, they're going to find a way to get you through. Now, does anyone here know students who are in the year above you that have like successfully had their credentials approved with that 840 hours? Anyone know? I'm looking to the chat box. Like everyone needs to say like, hi, or something in the chat box. Do you know where the chat box is? Do you just not know the answer, baby?
In the cohort directly above us, there's only one Canadian because of COVID.
Oh, wow.
So it would be 2 cohorts behind us.
Okay.
And I'm not familiar with anyone.
So I actually had 2 students who were going to come meet. One of his name's Plowman. I don't know, well, you guys don't know, but anyways, him and then another girl named Emily. They were going to come meet. Anyways, didn't end up working out, but I know that they've gone through the credentialing process and everything was fine, but I don't know about this 840 hours, but I'll kind of talk to you about what the rules have been. And then, yeah, hopefully we can get an answer for this. So CAPR has 5 criteria that you have to fulfill in order to get your credentials approved. So verification of identity, equivalent education level, supervised clinical practice, language proficiency, and then this knowledge of the Canadian healthcare system. So we're going to blast through these because honestly, your school does a great job. We've had so many USAID graduates go through our program. So I know it's been clear. Yours is probably just one of the first muddy years since COVID, right? So the first thing is you have to verify your identity. So this is super easy. Pretty much they're just saying that they're checking that everything that you've fulfilled is correct and it is you. Usually a passport or any kind of document with a photo and signature and your identity is accepted. You do not need to notarize it. Previously, you did need to notarize it. That's done. And then one of the photos should be signed at the back. Okay, equivalent education level. So you have to have completed a university level or entry to practice degree in physio. So again, this doesn't really matter because you're good. We know your program's good. In fact, you are all coming into it as doctors of physios and we're just measly masters of physios. So you're absolutely golden. Okay, this is the one that we need to get some answers on. So supervised clinical practice, CAPR does require you to have 1,025 hours of supervised clinical practice. 100 must be in MUSC, 100 must be in neuro, and 40 have to be in cardio rest. So it sounds like from what Alex said, the program's been really good at giving you those 3 core areas. But ultimately we need to kind of figure out what's happening with this extra 1,000, or what would that be? So you had 800, help me with math, 225, 185, something around there. Now, my understanding, these hours cannot be paid. So that's the only reason why I kind of keep circling back to this, is because if you are getting a job and you're working, well, that's obviously paid. There was a bunch of issues that came around this when students were kind of like in second year and COVID happened. There was actually a really sad situation. It wasn't in physio. I think it was actually in nursing, where there was a certain amount of practice hours that you needed to get. And then when everything closed and they weren't allowing students to come, they had this issue where people were like, well, we need hours. We need to be able to fulfill this. And so they said, okay, we're going to start letting students back in. So they did. And there was a nursing student who caught COVID and actually passed away. And the reason why I bring this up is because the system then put in place that they were actually going to pay students a very nominal amount. I think it was something crazy, like $7 an hour. But by paying them a small amount, it allowed them to access insurance. And because this student died and they weren't getting paid and ultimately they didn't have insurance, it was this big issue. So this got back to CAPR and they were doing their assessment and they said, no, we wouldn't allow any hours to be accepted if they are getting paid for them, even if it's a nominal amount. And then there was some leeway that was made for COVID, but now when we're in this like weird borderline COVID, not COVID time, I don't know what they're doing. So does anyone here have any clarity on this? If not, going to try to find you the answer. Not at this very moment, but I will definitely do it. No one is aware of this. Has anyone reached out to CAPR about this?
I think one of the students is going to reach out to CAPR tomorrow.
Okay. One more question then. Who is the person in your program that you would go to that you would like say, oh, I need my graduation paper sent? Like, who is that liaise between CAPR and your school?
That's a good question, and I can figure that out.
Okay. I've done a lot of these webinars, and there usually is like, people usually have a clear understanding of who that person is. So, that worries me that you guys don't have one. Well, not worries me. It just like, you guys should, because you have so many Canadians in the program. I would love to know that name if you do get it, Alex, because maybe I could kind of help them to figure out the answer. I know sometimes being in Australia, it's hard. I also have a lot of other contacts of people who are like that connection between universities and CAPR, and I could connect yours with those people. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll look into it. UCID is not the greatest at communicating and helping us Canadians, so that's why we don't know.
How many Canadians are in your program?
I think there's probably about 20 to 30 in our cohort.
Okay. Yeah, there was 30 signed up for the webinar. So I was thinking that's probably around, that's a lot. They should really be supporting you.
Yeah.
Did most of you all use OzTrack to go to UCID?
I think majority, but not all.
Okay. I'll also reach out to Jamie at OzCheck to just see if she has a good idea of who to contact at U of Sid, and just kind of talk to them about like, this needs to be tightened up on their end for future years anyways. So do you know if the 840 is always what it will be, or if that's just because you've been affected by COVID?
No, that's what it always has been at USID.
Okay. Okay, cool. Well, let's move on. Yeah, so this is kind of the only sticky thing that I feel like we do need to get an answer for you all. The next, number 4, language proficiency. This is so easy because you've completed your education in Australia, and so you don't need to do anything for the language proficiency. I know this sounds silly to talk about something that you don't need to do, but honestly, I get questions from Australian trained physios all the time about if they have to do what's called like TOEFL. You don't have to do any of it, so don't worry about that. Okay. I'm just looking. Pavle says Austrac did mention that we were able to work after the degree and that it should be fine with CAPR. Students from Sydney in 2020 have done paid work and got approved from CAPR. Perfect. I have a friend who is 2 cohorts above. I can clarify that. As a side note, the program is changing to a doctor of physio program next year. I'm not sure how that will change the clinical. Yeah. Okay. And I definitely know, like this story I was telling you about, this situation with the nurse that passed away. I know that CAPR did approve paid placements, but it was like an exception thing with COVID. And so I don't know how that works, if it's just something that's just kind of how your program is. But whoever finds an answer to this, please let me know, because yeah, it's important. I want to be kept in the loop. Okay, so language proficiency, you don't have to do anything with this. Now, the knowledge of the Canadian healthcare system. So this is something that all IEPTs, so it's internationally educated physiotherapists, you have to take an approved online course that has a formal method of assessment. Now, I reached out to actually on Instagram, I did a poll, I want to say it was maybe like 6 weeks ago, and I asked people to tell me which one they did. And then of that, I asked them kind of like which one was their favorite and which took the quickest time to do. So got some notes to tell you about. So first off, they said that the University of Alberta course was by far the one that most people said that they did. So that they said this course is easy to follow and found the course timing deadlines quite comfortable. So when I asked about the course timeline, they said the course timeline is 6 weeks. However, pretty much everyone was able to finish it in 1 week, and they got their digital certificate sent through email. So they also said that once you can actually take this at any time. You can take any of these courses at any time. So you could even do it now. It does ask you to put in your CAPR credentialing code, but if you don't have it, that's fine. When you do go to apply for the credentialing process, you would give them this certificate. So you don't have to wait until you've put your credentials in to do this. Now, I wanted to just follow up with CAPR to make sure that this was correct information. And so they responded back by saying, yes, absolutely, you can take it early. The problem is that they can't guarantee that they will always approve those courses. So say you took one that was like a little bit more fringy, and then they decide to not accept that one anymore, then it could kind of like all be for nothing. But the University of Alberta's program has been around for a long time. I do not see that one going anywhere. So that's the one I would do if I were you. Now, I did have a few other students tell me that they did the University of Toronto IEHP program. Now, the feedback from that, truthfully, wasn't that great. So what they said is that you would have these kind of discussions. You had to only go through the course modules as they opened it. So you actually kind of had to be present for all 6 weeks, even though like cumulative time, it was probably the same between the two. They said the Alberta one was about 1 week, about 4 to 6 hours a week. And then with the Toronto one, it was 6 weeks and it was like a couple of hours every week. Hopefully that makes sense. Any questions about this at all? This course costs $500, pretty much no matter where you take it, but yeah, it's 500 Canadian. Any questions? No. You might be typing. Okay. Again, if you have questions, please let me know. These webinars are way more fun when you just ask me things. Get the chat going. Okay. So let's talk about preparing for the PCE. So we've kind of talked about credentialing. Truthfully, it's seriously so easy. So don't stress. Honestly, it's really easy. The biggest thing advice that I have for the credentialing process is just start early. Like as soon as you graduate, get this going. You can send everything in. And then if you haven't received your graduation certificate, which that's why I was asking when your ceremony is, sometimes those certificates actually don't get sent out till then. But you can ask your school to fill out a specific form, and you'll see this, like it's very clearly laid out when you go to do it on the CAPR's website. And then they will send it early for you. Oh, so don't worry if there is that kind of lag between December and May. Okay, again, if you have questions about credentialing, let me know, type them in, we'll pause, we'll talk about it. Otherwise, we'll move on to the exam. So just because I want to make sure that there are truly real humans, 15 of you here, tell me on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being like not at all, you're confident you're going to pass everything, and 10 being like you're so afraid you're thinking about it right now. How scared are you for the competency exams to come to Canada? Let me know. 5, 8, 5, 4. Okay. 5 is kind of, I feel like that's a good number. We got to calm down the 8s. Don't worry. Okay. Just saw a question come in from UT. So we can only start the credentialing process once we finish everything. So by everything, I would say yes, if that means your program, like your schooling, you have to be done your schooling before you can apply for credentialing. You can apply for credentialing and wait to do that Healthcare in Canada course. It just has to be done like pretty soon. So if you do have like a chill semester at all, it's really easy. I would just get it done when you're in school mode. I would get it done early. Okay. 5s and 4s. I love that. So let's talk about it. So there are 2 parts to the physio competency exam. There is a written exam that is at a national level. So CAPR also does the written exam. It has to be done. It doesn't matter if you trained at UBC like me. It doesn't matter if you trained in the UK or India or Australia. You have to do this exam. Okay. It's a tough exam. We'll definitely talk about it. And then part 2 is that you may have to do a clinical exam. Now, it really is going to depend on the province. Pre-COVID, CAPR also had a clinical exam. They messed it up so bad, so many times. And ultimately, the provinces said, we're just going to do our own thing. And so we're seeing that there are clinical exams in BC and Alberta and Ontario. Okay. Now, the other provinces have kind of a supervision practice. We can talk about that a little bit. Is there anyone who is going to a province that's not BC, Alberta, or Ontario? Back to live. I can talk about that process, but it seems to be most people go to those provinces. Saskatchewan. That's it. Just Nikita going back to Sask. Okay. So in that province, you have this supervised practice. So you have to, you'll go, you will pass your written, you'll apply for an interim license, and then you do have to work under the supervision. I think it's about a year. And you do have kind of little practice assessments. We haven't heard the best reviews from people who have been doing this. They said it's really messy. It gets to be expensive because you're paying for mentors. And a lot of people want to hire you because you are so like work heavy in order to like put all of these assessment forms in. So we've had a lot of people in Saskatchewan and the Maritimes who have actually just gone and taken like the Ontario clinical exam, and then they can just work right away. There's a beautiful thing with the Labor Mobility Act in Canada, and it's that no matter where you become licensed, so if you take the BC clinical exam, if you take the Ontario clinical exam, it doesn't matter. Once you become fully licensed, you can work anywhere in Canada. Now, most people do take the exam where they lived or where they want to live. But if you know that you are like really not strong at in-person exams or hands-on exams and you want to take like a case-based exam, there are options to take the Ontario exam. Okay. The written exam, jump in here. The written exam used to be offered 5 times a year. We just got the announcement from CAPR that they are moving it to 10 times a year. This is funny. I wish I knew the logic behind this. I think they're just like trying to get people through faster, but I feel like where they should have put the effort is to get credentialing speeds faster, because that's taking a long time. Any guesses at how long it takes from when you send in your papers to when they say, okay, yeah, you're good, apply for an exam? Any guesses? Yeah, so we're looking at about 6 to 9 months. I would say, like, I don't think I've ever seen someone in the last little while that's under 8 months. They're saying it's 6 to 9 months, but it's taken a long time. So make sure you get your paperwork in right away. Okay. I just did a post on Instagram about this. Once you do get your credentials approved, you have to take your first written exam within 2 years of getting that approval, which won't matter for you because you all are wanting to come back to Canada anyway. So you're going to probably do it fast. Unless you found a little Aussie over there that you've fallen in love with and you're like, oh, I don't know, am I going to go back to Canada? I have 2 friends that did medical school there, and they never came back. Found little ladies, fell in love, and now they're docs over there, and they're like, nope, not coming back. Okay, so let's dive into the written exam a little bit. So with the written exam, you are going to have 180 vignette style questions. So in your program, have you been assessed using vignette style questions before? Yes, no. So quiet. Just yes or no? Yes, no, maybe? Do we know what vignette style questions are? We've probably read it now. No. Okay, thanks, Kat. So vignette style questions are kind of like a case. So sometimes they're a paragraph, sometimes they're like 2-3 paragraphs, but they'll give you quite a bit of information about your client. Not necessarily all the information in that vignette is useful for that question. And then they give you about 3 to 6 follow-up questions. So like your normal multiple choice, but they all draw from information that was in that case. So this is difficult. Oh, sorry. This is difficult. It is a lot of information to go through. And yeah, it's just tough when you are in like a high stress exam and you're reading these heavy cases and you're trying to figure out like what's relevant and what's not, right? The options are A through D. So there's no E, which is lovely. And it is a best answer exam, meaning every single option in the exam could be right. You have to pick the best one. This is really difficult. Did any of you, sorry, I'm just seeing Kyle's question. Are they multiple choice or short answer? So everything's multiple choice. Did any of you see the question that we just posted with the giveaway that Ivana won? Did anyone see that question about MRSA and the therapist was working with a patient and they left the room and went to go work with someone else, and you as the therapist saw this, the room wasn't marked, they weren't wearing protective gowns, what would you do? Did anyone see that question? Yes, Alex did. Ivana did, I know that. Okay, I would encourage you to go take a look at that question. It's an awesome question, and it's a great example of, there's a lot of different steps that came out of that question. It said, like, go talk to your supervisor, stop the therapist from going and seeing the other patients, let the management admin know that the room was not clearly marked. So all those things are right. Like you want to do all those, but the purpose of the question is to figure out what's the first thing that you would do. And so this is what makes these questions hard, is that you can kind of convince yourself that all of them are right. Not even convince, because they are, but you could kind of convince yourself of the importance of all the answers. But what you really need to do in this written exam is you have to have a strong content, strong baseline, or what's the word I'm thinking of? Yeah, we'll go with baseline. So you have to have a foundation. You have to have a strong foundational knowledge of physio. For example, you have to know if a patient has MRSA, you should be doing contact precautions. They should be wearing a gown. They should be wearing gloves. The patient should be in a marked private room, right? From there, now that you have that knowledge, now you need to put the clinical reasoning together to say, okay, what's the first thing I'm going to do? What is the best method to ensure that I'm leading a patient-centered approach? And so that's the safety of the patient. You always need to make sure that the patient is safe. And so ultimately, you would want to stop that therapist from going into the next room, right? So this is why this exam is tricky, is because they're not asking you origin, innervation, and insertion. They're not asking you, what is the position for the Lockman's test? Like, they're not asking these beautiful, easy flashcard style exam things. No, they're asking you true situational questions that require you to have the fundamental knowledge, but then also need you to integrate kind of the clinical reasoning and professional standards to figure out what you should do. Tough exam. Okay, so 180 of the questions are like this, and then there's 20 that are just these lovely little standalone questions where you get a question, you answer it, boom, you close that, you move to the next one. Standalone questions are wonderful. This is what probably most of you have been tested with through your whole academic life. The vignette style ones, they're new for a lot of people. Okay. So I do have some strategies. I'm going to share this one with you because I think this is something that even if you're following me on Instagram, like this is a strategy I'd love you to start using now. And that is when you are looking at a vignette style question, starting like as soon as you leave here, if you see a vignette style question, I want you to get your timer out and click 1 minute and 10 seconds. And that's all the time you're going to give yourself to do that vignette style question. Same thing, if you're seeing a standalone question on wherever you're doing a multiple choice question, I want you to only give yourself 45 seconds. Now, this comes down to a ton of research that we did to figure out what's the best timing and pacing. And we found that the best way to get through this exam is to work on 1 minute and 10 seconds for those 180 vignettes, and then 45 seconds through a standalone. It gives you a bit of buffer, review time, and that takes you to that 4-hour point, which is how long this exam is. Okay. So start practicing now, start working on your timing now. Easy, top 3 issues students have with this exam is timing. They run out of time. So get used to this now. Alrighty. On the exam, there are, it's not a negative exam, meaning that if you have a correct response, you get 1 mark, an incorrect response, you get 0. I know this might sound silly, but there are a lot of countries out there that do negative, meaning it incentivizes you to not answer if you don't know the answer. Is that crazy? I've never been examined like that, but there's a lot of schools that do that. So the exam evaluates 4 areas of practice. This makes me laugh every time I read this. MSK, neuro, cardiovascular, respiratory, other. Like literally on the blueprint, it said other. I feel like it's just lazy. They're like, we can't find a topic, so we're just going to call it other and throw everything in. So I kind of say multi-system is another great term for other. But ultimately, you can go to the CAPR website and you can look at their blueprint. The blueprint is going to give you both domains and practice areas. And then from there, you'll see the breakdown on the exam. So about 50% of the questions are, as they say, MSK, like 20%, I think, is neuro, 15 other cardio. I would hands down say that these professional standards questions are about 50% of the exam. And then we're seeing kind of the rest split in here, but definitely high cardio resp questions that are on there too. There's really no exam where we've seen MSK be 50%. It's a lie. It just, ugh. What area of practice are most of you the most confident in? And use a number like 1, 2, 3, or 4. So 1 MSK, 2 neuro, 3 cardio resp. Where are you the most confident? Yeah, I'm expecting to see a lot of MSKs. Yeah. So that's not a bad thing because in theory, that is supposed to be the most highly testable thing. But I will say it just isn't seeming like it's 50% anymore. There's just so many more professional standard questions. And it's high amount of cardiovascular respiratory in that exam. Okie dokie. Let's talk about the clinical exams just a little bit. So in the clinical exams in Alberta and BC, you're doing an in-person exam. What happens is you go in on exam day and you have tracks. So you either have 8-minute stations if you're doing BC, or you have 10 and 5-minute stations if you're doing the Alberta exam. But ultimately you walk into the testing center. There's a bunch of you there. You stand outside of a door, you read a question. I even saying this to you, I get like PTSD stress from having to do this exam. But like seriously. So you walk in, you see the question on the wall, you read the question. When the buzzer goes, you go in, you do your clinical interaction. When the buzzer goes, you get a warning buzzer. When the next buzzer goes, you're done. You leave the station, you go to the next room. Your timer has already started. It starts right after that other station ended, and you do the same thing back to back to back. It's wild. It's a lot. Do you do OSCEs in your school? I'm assuming yes. OSCEs or like these clinical stations. Okay. So you know the stress. It's a lot, right? Like it is a really stressful type of exam. But yeah, so that's what Alberta and BC are. Ontario is unique. This is a super, super unique style of exam. It's a 2-part exam. And the first one is verbal cases and questions. And then the second part of the exam, which are both on like one day. But the second part of the exam is ethical stations or questions. There's 11 of them. But Ontario's exam takes place over a 3-hour period. Okay, any questions about exams? Like seriously, ask me anything. Okay, timeline. Once we write the written, is there a specific timeline we must complete the practical exam? So good question. I'm going to answer like a few questions within that one. So after you pass the written, there isn't a timeline for you to do the practical as far as I know. Like I want to say it's at least like it's as long as you're within 2-3 years, I think you're fine. I don't have a like 100% answer for that, but I've definitely seen people have good gaps between there. In every province in Canada, as of today, September something, no, it's August. I don't even know the day. As of today, if you pass your written exam, you can work as an interim therapist, meaning you can see patients, you can bill, you can get paid. The reason why I bring up the date is because as of October 30th or 31st, BC is changing that, and you will have to pass both your written and clinical before you can work as an interim therapist. This sucks. Honestly, this sucks because a lot of people gain a lot of experience working as an interim and it helps them with their clinical exam. But it all comes down to safety of the public, and they don't want people practicing before they've done this clinical exam. I think it's so stupid, but I don't make the rules. So the other thing I will tell you is that for the written exam, you can prep for the exam and you can take the exam in Australia. You do not have to come home. So you can keep working as a physio where you are now. And once you've received the, yes, you've passed, then you can come home and you can apply to work. Okay. Unless you're in BC, you're going to miss that timing. So if you are in BC, you still can prep. We have a prep course. Like our written prep course is all virtual. We don't have any in-person components. We have live components, but we don't have like, you don't have to be there in person. And we never have. So even COVID didn't change that. So you're good. Like you can completely prep for the written in Australia. For the clinical, if you're doing Ontario, all online. So you're totally good there. If you just wanted to take the Ontario exam and still live in Australia, you could do that. If you want to come back to Alberta, you can apply for your interim license after passing the written. You can work as an interim and then take your clinical. In BC, again, you can't do that. You'd have to have passed your written and passed your clinical. And ultimately, you still can prep for your clinical abroad. We do have virtual classes. They're live, but you're meeting on Zoom and you're practicing hands-on skills. Sometimes we ask you to bring partners in. So we definitely have like a proven method for that. But yeah, ultimately, if you can stay in Australia and work and make money, that's nice. Okay. Next question, if you pass the written and fail the clinical, do you need to retake both? Nope. So once you pass your written, you're good to go. I do think there is a certain timeline though, that if you don't pass your clinical, like you only get 3 attempts for any of the exams. You get 3 attempts at the written and you get 3 attempts for the clinical. And if you fail your 3rd attempt, I hate this. I don't want to scare you guys because none of you are going to get to this. But if one were to fail their 3rd attempt, you're done. Like there's no 4th attempt. There really is no 4th attempt. So you don't want to mess with the attempts. You want your first to be a pass. Don't get yourself into like a situation where you're like, I'm just going to try it. Why not? Like I've done pretty good my whole life. Once you're in a 2nd attempt situation, your stress has skyrocketed, and there are proven statistics that if you fail once, you're much more likely to fail your 2nd time. So don't fail this exam. You only get 3 attempts at each. Okay, how many times a year is the BC clinical exam? So Irvin, this year we had February, May, August, and November. So it's looking about 4 times a year. My hope would be once this bylaw changes in October, that they freaking increase that, because they need to have more iterations of that exam if people are just like can't work. That seems wild to me. So I do hope that they offer it more times a year. Okay, is the Ontario exam similar to the CAPR exams? Okay, I recently just heard about this CAPR, I think when I met with UQ. No, it doesn't seem like it is. Well, I guess you could tell me a little bit, but from talking to the last cohort that I met with, they said it wasn't really. So what it is you have a case, it's a pretty long case, like 2-3 pages long. And then from there, you have kind of 5 questions that you have to go through. And these questions talk about like assessing your knowledge to make sure that they're appropriate, subjective, objective assessments, like your special tests, your differential diagnoses, who you're going to refer them to, like really creating a full solid, you have to talk for, I think it's like 45 minutes. So you have to get really good at understanding those cases. And then the second case is more about treatment. So understanding, what you're addressing their problems and creating a treatment plan. So Pavli, I don't know if I'm saying your name right. Does it sound different from CAPR? Yes. Okay. Yeah. They said it was different too. Buzz is asking, what are the pass fail rates for these exams? So the pass fail rates are pretty high for first-time exam takers. What's your thoughts? What do you think the pass rate is? Let's say for Australian trained physios, what do you think the pass rate is? First time, because remember, you want to pass on the first time. The pass rate goes down as you go to your 2nd and 3rd. So what do you think the first time pass rate is? 80, 70, so 77, right in between there. This stat was from 2017. So she getting old. This is an old stat. They have not updated this. From what we understand, the pass rate in general has gone down about 5 to 6 points. So we're looking at this stat probably for 2023, 2024 being more around 71, 72%. Makes sense? Makes sense? Again, like the clinical exam's not even there anymore, so it's not a very helpful stat. Okay, look at that. Answered your question with a common question slide. Love that. Any other questions before we go on to talk about the costs? Okay, I'm going to ask another question of you. How much do you think in total? So like credentialing, applying for your exams, applying for your license, taking prep courses, how much do you think you're going to spend in this process? Canadian. $5K, 3-5K. Okay, let's start with this. So your credentialing application fee is $14.86. This goes right to CAPR. You then have to have your university transcript, filled forms, and procurement and dispatch fee is $200. Notarization fees, I don't know how accurate this is for Australia, but let's say about $25 per page. So we're at $300. You need to send your final assessment results by courier from a location to a location outside of Canada. So that's $171. You need to have your registration for the written exam. That is $13.68. So here's the thing. You don't want to fail because then you're paying that again to that $13.68. The Healthcare in Canada course, which I told you is $500. Now the clinical exam registration fee I put in here is $1,900. It does differ depending on which province you're in. So that could be a little bit more. And then your licensure fees to actually apply for your license, $700. So we're looking at $66.25. Hold your horses. There's some more numbers coming. So pulling over that $66.25 to the top of this chart here. If you were to do a written prep course, so I'll talk a little bit about the fee for our course, but it's usually $14.99. We do have a discount code. It's actually a funding code that we get. So we get a lump sum of funding at the start of every month to help encourage more physios within Canada. And so what we do is, depending on how much we get, we divide that over those certain courses. So we take like $4.99 and see how many courses we're able to apply that to. And so we have the ability to discount a certain amount of courses every month to $1,000. We usually, just a little helpful tip, we usually get our funding at the very end of the month. So when the best time to sign up for is the beginning of a month, because that's when we always have courses that are able to have this discount. Okay, so that's $1,000 if we apply that discount. If you do decide to do a clinical prep course, you get a large discount if you've taken your written course with us. For example, if you take our written and then you do the Ontario course, normally the Ontario course is $14.99. If you have done the written course with us, we take $400 off of that. So definitely try to give you a little nudge to take both courses or take the written with us to help you with the clinical. So ultimately, you're looking at around $2,000 to prep if you're using the discounts. Now, I will talk a little bit about Launchpad. So Launchpad is a company that was started by a guy named Chris Nolan. Chris Nolan was one of the founders of Austrek. And what he saw was that physios and dentists and, physicians were going abroad to Australia, and then they were having a hard time finding quality places to work in Canada. So what he's done is he's gone and vetted a bunch of clinics in Canada and said, hey, if you use him to get placed, so you find a job through them, then they will actually give you a $1,500 scholarship to use towards us. So ultimately, if you take that $2,000 for the courses, you apply their scholarship of $1,500, you would be prepping for the exam for about $500. Again, that's if you are placed in a job with Launchpad. What a lot of students have done in the past is they are paying for the prep course fees first, because if they can't get a job, right, they have to pass the exams. And then ultimately, when Launchpad does place them, they'll say to us, well, the student has $1,500, and we say, just pay that to the student because they've already paid the fees for us. Okay, so the total amount needed to become a PT in Canada with prep is around 7,125 Canadian. So that's a little bit more than 3,000 to 5,000. It's a lot. This is a very, very expensive process. And truthfully, you've been paying international fees for your program. So I'm sure this is like a drop of the bucket with student loans. I just paid off my student loans, PS. But yeah, it's a lot. It is a lot of money. A lot of money. It's expensive to work in healthcare. Ain't that ironic? Any questions around this? Everyone's just a little bit crying right now, right? Yeah, brown face emoji. I know. Okay, so let's keep going. When and how should I start prepping for the PC? So I'm gonna have a sip of water. I really don't want students prepping too early for this. I think if I could give you an analogy, it would be like this exam is the monster under your bed. Okay. You think about it, you kind of always aware that it's there. And ultimately what I want this info session, if you will, to be, is that we're gonna just pop our head into the bed, gonna wave to the little monster, which is the exam, and be like, I know you're there. we're not going to deal with you right now. We're going to come back in a few months and we're going to just sort this out. Okay. So ask all your questions, feel the 8s, feel the 9s out of 10 of stress, but ultimately let's get you down to like a 1 or a 2. Let's not worry about this too much. We know that if you prep right, you're going to pass. And we know that it actually has a fairly good pass rate for this exam if you do the work, right? It just comes down to making sure you prep properly. So ultimately, when we think about prepping properly, we have to think about when are we going to start? So the credentialing process, as we talked about, is going to take about 6 to 9 months. So I think the best time to prep is when you send in your papers. When that is done and when you send in the papers, I think that's a beautiful time to start. You're finished your program. You are hopefully going to be working clinically, and you can slowly start going through the materials. Our course is about a 16-week study plan. So if you do have a different amount of time, which you will if you're prepping that early, you can take twice as long to get through the modules that are laid out in the study plan because you have some more time. Okay. The other thing I will add is that our premium access video course, which is what 99.9% of Australian trained physios take. They don't take the live course, they take the premium course. With that, you have a 6-month subscription, but we do have a kind of like incentive for groups where if you are registering in a group of 6 or more, we extend your access to an until you pass access. So you can register at like when you've sent in your papers, and then you would get switched to this longer access to the course. Okay. I'll keep going through these common questions. So what topics are covered on the PCE? So this is an example of the blueprint. It's a picture from the CAPR's website. You can see it's kind of useless, to be honest. It's very not detailed at all. Like, for example, degenerative joint disease, mechanical spine abnormalities. Like, it's big. Muscles, contusions, strains, tears, and weaknesses. Think of all the things that go into that very first one. It's just not very helpful. So yeah, this is what they give you, and I'll leave it at that. Okay. So for courses, we do have the premium access video course, as I was mentioning. So this comes with everything you need to prep. It's going to have your anatomy manual, your course manual, your quizzes, mock exams, weekly office hours. The first 30 minutes we spend going over highly testable topics. And then the last half hour we spend just answering your questions. It comes with the ethics masterclass. So it's really everything there that you need to prep. I won't go too much into the prep course, just because that's not the purpose of me being here. I really just want to answer any questions you have about coming to Canada. If you do have questions about the course, I would be more than happy to set up like a one-on-one time, or I can stay at the end and answer any questions. Okay. Can I prepare for the PCE in Australia? So we kind of already chatted about this. Absolutely, you can. Depending on where you're writing your exam, the CAPR is offering remote proctoring. And when they did their announcements just like a week ago, it doesn't seem like it's going anywhere. So it's not like a just COVID change that's going to go away. Seems like they are going to keep this. Okie dokie. I have a little bit of a choose your own adventure here. I have a question that I can show you, like a practice question. I'll just like quickly put up on the screen there. So I have a question that I can show you. And we can go through it and talk about the rationale. I appreciate that a lot of you got to go in like 7 minutes. So I'm not sure how to best utilize your time with me. Ultimately, I just want to answer any questions that you have and hopefully de-stress this process a bit. So why don't we open it up to questions and leave it there, I guess. Questions? Come on. It's hard. Sometimes it's like, I don't know what questions to ask because I'm just lost and I don't know what I don't know. How many of you, let me get the ball rolling. How many of you are going to apply for the credentialing to get your credentials approved like as soon as you graduate? Give me like a me, yes, something, Jeffrey, perfect. Okay, awesome. Do you feel more confident about what that credentialing process looks like? Like, have we de-stressed that a little bit for you? I use the global we. It was more than just me that did all the homework to get prepped for this meeting with you. So that's why I say we. Okay, cool. Half. Oh, Yudi, I'm sorry. Okay. And then what about the actual prep for the exams, understanding what's involved in the exams? Do we feel more confident about that? Are there questions? Anything about the actual exams? Okay. A question. Thank you. So regarding the prep course, on average, how many hours a week do people study? Okay, this is a great question and probably one of the more common questions that I get asked. And I feel like my answer to this is kind of shitty. So bear with me. Everyone is so different, right? Like your clinical skills, your knowledge, your study style, your speed of learning is all very, very different. We have done 3 different assessments at different points of our kind of course creation. They've all been over the last 3 years, and we've asked students to let us know on average how much they were prepping. And we're only asking the students who are passing, just so you know. And so typically, if students are sticking to the 16-week study plan, we're looking at about 30 hours. And there are that's the mean or median. That's like the average. I don't know which one that is, but it's the average. So there's definitely highers and there's definitely lowers. So if you are doing a longer study plan, say like a 32-week study plan, you'd be more along the lines of that 15 to 20 hour study plan or studying per week. Okay. If you signed up to take the exam but don't feel ready on the day, can you not take it without penalty? So, Buzz, there are deferral timelines and rules. So you might have seen us on Instagram. Sometimes we'll post Friday's the last day to defer for the cheapest rate. We'll put things on there because it is, I want to say it's maybe $100 if you do it a certain amount of time. If you're within 21 days to a week, it's a little bit more. And then if you're within 3 days, it's very expensive. So ultimately, if you don't think you're ready, you ideally want to know at least 3 weeks in advance so you can pay less. But you do have to pay to change your exam. Okay, what % of students pass with the course you offer? Great question. We just did a big update actually to our stats. So we have 2 contingency things that we look at with our pass rate. So number 1, you have to finish the course. I know that sounds really silly and almost like an automatic thing, but we do have students who register, they complete 11% of the course for whatever reason, life happens, and they end up just taking an attempt. So we don't count that. You do have to have gone through 90% or more of the course for us to consider that you've done the course. The other kind of contingency is that you have to score over 75% on our mock exam. 70, 75? I should know this. I just did it. Anyways, one of those baseline numbers. I think it's 70, you have to score over. If students are scoring under, we say to them, this is a key indicator that you're not ready to take the exam. Ultimately, again, if someone just says, I don't care, I'm going to take the exam, we don't count it. So it is pretty specific. You have to have taken the course and you have to have scored over 70% in the exam. If you do that, our pass rate is 91%. So it's good. Don't get me wrong. It's a good pass rate. However, that means 1 in 10 people who prepped, who on paper seemed ready, are still unsuccessful. So I say this because we're not magic. I'm not here's a perfect little pill, kids, take this and you'll pass. That's not it. You've got to put in the work. You have got to get to a point where you've probably studied more for this exam than you've ever done in your life. I had a lot of student consultations today, and I always break down why someone fails into one of 3 situations, but one of those 3 is an overconfidence. Not saying that any of you have it, but ultimately, if you've gotten to this point in your life where you are at the point of taking this exam, you're probably a highly successful individual. You've done well at things, you've excelled academically, and you've probably never had a ground zero humbling moment where you've just absolutely failed. And this exam will do that to you if you don't put in the work. right? And again, I'm not saying this to scare you because it is so 100% passable. Like it definitely is passable, but you got to put the work in. And some people just, I don't know, don't. So do put the work in and you'll pass. Okay. What is a passing grade for the test? So we don't actually know this. What happens is they look at the statistics of how questions have performed on different exams. And then they get all those questions together and say, okay, given the difficulty of this exam, this is what the passing score is. So for example, if there's 200 questions on the exam, they might be like, all right, so this exam, you have to score over 165. I don't know, I'm just making up a number. Now, in theory, that means every single person could pass. And in theory, it means every single person could fail the exam. So why I tell you this is because the passing score is set before you take it, which means you're not competitive against your peers that are taking the exam with you. That score has already been set. So don't worry about like, not showing someone like this great study idea that you have because you don't want them to pass and then you fail. It's not like that. Unless they're taking a different exam than you, then it kind of is. But yeah, we don't know what the passing score is because they standardize it every time. Always 600. You just have to get a 600 score. There's 200 questions, and so it's a standardized score. Kyle, I kind of along the same question as Buzz. What is the cutoff score for the pass fail for the written exam? Yeah, we don't have that. I will tell you though, that we see in our exams when students score over 70% of our exam, they do usually go on to pass. So if you would like to make kind of a projection based off of like, I don't know, for every exam that goes through, we probably have at least 250 to 300 data points, meaning like that many people have taken our mock exams. And so it's pretty reliable. Like if you score over 70, it's a good indicator that you're ready based on the data. How far in advance do you have to register for the written exam? So registration opens or closes, I think about 2 months before the exam. So this is where it gets sticky. Say your credentials take 9 months. And then you apply for the next exam. So now you're 11 months out. That's a while. Okay. Any other questions? My biggest joy, my biggest joy is talking to students when they pass. So my second biggest joy is helping students kind of just feel less scared in this process. That was a big reason of why I went into this, was because I was seeing these people who had failed and they were these brilliant minds, but ultimately they just weren't studying the right thing. And so a huge passion of mine is just getting you to that point where you just feel confident and secure and sure of kind of what you're doing to prep. So I get that we're talking a little bit early. It's the end of August right now, and you still have got some school left. But maybe what I'll do is I'll send an email out come like early January, just saying hello to some of you and seeing if you do have any questions. Feel free to reach out to me before then if you want. But ultimately, I think one of the best things to do right now is just enjoy the end of your program. Never in your life are you going to be in this perfect little situation of all like-minded individuals really focused on one goal, and that is becoming physios and being better clinicians. So soak it up, enjoy that. Don't worry about this exam. It will be there. It's not going anywhere. And the prep is really not that bad. You just need some structure and you just need to know what to do, right? So don't stress about this exam, please. Okay, that's all I have for you. I will put my email into the chat box there. I will make a reminder to myself to reach out to all of you in January. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. If you do have questions, as I said, just shoot me an email. Okay, all righty. Was it helpful? I feel like you all were a very quiet group. your quietness brings out my insecurities. And when I get insecure, I get super weird and goofy. So I apologize if I seem like an absolute idiot. Yeah, but thanks for spending an hour of your time with me. Bye, everyone.